when you're doing this digital marketing, metrics are everything, because you got to get to the point where you know what you're doing, and you test all these different things, and you can see what works and what doesn't, and then you can kind of double down, obviously, on the things that work.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study Series. On today's episode, we have Jack Marshall, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Bolster AI, a company specializing in AI-driven solutions designed to enhance customer acquisition and sales systems. With a background in both technology and business strategy, Jack has been instrumental in leading Bolster AI's efforts to integrate cutting-edge AI technologies into their service offerings, helping clients optimize their sales processes and achieve significant growth. And that's why we're excited to have him on the show. Jack, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. I'm really excited to talk about some of the work that you're doing with that cutting edge AI technology. But before we get into the nitty gritty of things here, I'd love to just kind of start with a quick little background on who you are, where you came from, how you landed as the CEO of Bolster.
Well, I been in technology a while. I'm an electrical engineer. Worked at Texas Instruments out of college, and then came to Silicon Valley thinking they made silicon chips here, but turns out they don't. So I moved into software, and I started a company back in the dot-com boom called PhotoLoft. It was the first photo sharing site, and it grew up, went public, and probably way before its time, but that was certainly the fashion back then. And then after the dot-com crash, we sold it to Canon, kind of at pennies on the dollar. But the guy who had built our architecture, a man named Roger Thornton, he founded a company called Fortify Software, which was a software security company. Looked for flaws in software, software code, and pointed out security vulnerabilities. So I went to work with Roger, pre-revenue, and we built that company up, and it was sold to HP eventually, and then that whole team, we went to another company called Alien Vault, which was a SIM, another security company, and built that up and sold that to AT&T. And then I worked at another company that Roger was on the board of. They got bought by Imperva. And so I've been with a bunch of security companies, and that's how I got to Bolster, which is a cybersecurity company.
Right. So a lot of varied experiences from a bunch of different places, but mostly kind of in the field of technology and security. So I wonder, in your role at Bolster, how you've kind of evolved into that space. How long have you been with them?
I've been at Bolster for about a year and a half, year and three quarters, something like that.
And so when you started out, what were some of the big challenges that you were aiming at tackling?
Well, here at Bolster, Bolster was founded by two people who came out of the Cisco email security group. And
Okay.
and what they did, they created a website called Checkfish, and you could type in any URL there, and it will tell you if it's phishing or not. And there's a number of AI algorithms that do that, and that was released in 2019. And since then, it's tested over 6.5 billion URLs. So it's one of the most mature training sets for that type of thing, I think, in the world. I don't know who measures those type of things, but it's a big one, right? 6.5
Right.
billion is a lot. And so it's gotten really good at that. And so the company created an enterprise offering of that service for customers to look for people that were typo squatting their domain and trying to phish their employees or trying to scam people. And since then, it's had a fair amount of success. Got some very, very big customers, the names that you've heard of on board. And we're moving into the email security space too, where we do things for external abuse mailboxes, because we can go through that and find all the an external company, they'll give you an email address to send suspected phishing, and maybe it's real, maybe it's not. And so we separate those. But a thing that we have really done well is take down those sites. So if we find a phishing site, we will take it down. If we find a LinkedIn profile that's not valid, we will take it down. And so we got really good at detecting phish and detecting scams and taking them down. And that's kind of our specialty.
So I guess I understand like big picture stuff. Who needs this? Like we all need to be protected against the nefarious characters out there. But from a more practical standpoint, I asked the question, who needs this from the perspective of who your potential clients could be in terms of how you service.
Yeah, our clients range from banks to consumer companies. We got a lot of big consumer companies like Netflix and McAfee and Uber, and just that touch a lot of consumers. And I like to think, and I tell our team this, the neat thing about this job is you get to wake up in the morning and do something good for the world and good for yourself all at the same time. So I can tell you an example of one of our banking customers. There is a group out of Morocco that would phish them all the time. And they had a list of all their customer accounts, and they would send these emails to all their customers. And, they got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of customers. And, some, you can imagine somebody like, my mother when she was alive, she may have typed in her user ID and password, and then these people would log in to that account, wire all the money out to another account at the same bank and to another account at the same bank. And they go to like 20 different accounts at the same bank and then sell it out of the bank. And it would all happen just like this. And so that person suddenly logs in and finds out all their money's gone. And it's a panic situation for them because, they'll get their money back. The bank will pay them their money back, but it's not an easy thing to do. And you're out of that money for a while. And it's just a heartbreaking situation for people. So that's kind of how I see our technology really being a benefit. We're helping the bank to save them money from people taking money, but we're also helping those consumers, the customers of our customer, to prevent them from having to go through these just horrendous experiences. Because when you find out all your money's gone, it's panic sets in very quickly.
Right. So you mentioned working with some pretty big names there. I guess that puts your business, just for perspective for everybody that's kind of listening and watching, like what's your like current revenues situation? What are you guys sitting at in terms of your current revenue model?
Well, we're trying to hit 10 million in ARR this year, and so it's a big goal, but that's what we're shooting for.
Right. Okay. So then, what sorts of challenges are you seeing present themselves now with such a aspirational goal?
Well, the challenges we have are the technology that the bad guys use evolves, and it's kind of amazing when you think about it. Sometimes I see some of the things these people do, and I just like, with your talent, you could get a job just about anywhere. And like we see people have created these websites and they'll be geofenced, which means like if you look at them from one angle, from one country, they'll look fine. But if you come at it from another country, they'll be a phishing site. And the people that are hosting those sites, they're somebody's paying that hoster. You have to pay to have that website up there somewhere, or use one of these services. And so they're not really amenable to just take things down unless you can prove to them that it's being used in a illicit manner. And so if you have one of these geofencing issues, say you come into it from the Philippines and it looks bad, but you look at it from somewhere in Europe and it looks good, and so you tell the hosting company that, hey, you should take this site down. They look at it and they see it from Europe and go, oh, it looks fine to me. What's wrong with it? But if they came into it from the Philippines, it would look bad. And so we have to have these proxies all over the world that could come into all these different places and then record all that evidence so that you can present it to the hosting facility and say, hey, look, yeah, sure, it's good from Europe, but it was bad from the Philippines. And that's an example of the type of issue that you see. We also see bad guys that will bring up a site that looks fine for an hour and then bring it up as a phishing site for another hour and then flop back and forth. And so, you almost have to scan these things constantly just to catch it doing its bad thing. I mean, these people are extremely clever at what they do. And I don't, a lot of times it's not even the people doing it, because they go get these phishing kits on the dark web that are very sophisticated, and then they just use them to send them to all their email addresses. So I would say back to your question of what is challenging, it's the changing nature of the people who create these phishing sites and scam sites. They just are very clever, and they have all day, it seems like, to work on it. And why they spend all those cycles and IQ points on that is a mystery to me, because I'm sure they could get jobs somewhere, but it's obviously lucrative to them. I think there's $48 billion lost in fraud on the internet last year. That's a pretty big market.
Right, yeah. And when you treat it like it is just that, a market, then there's a huge upside or potential for upside for anybody that's interested in participating in something like that. So how does that echo into the messaging when it comes to trying to find new clients and kind of bring them into your ecosystem?
Well, I think the thing that we have done that we're changing is we've marketed ourselves a little bit as a brand protection company. And there's a lot of, and brand protection is a very broad category. It's an old category. I mean, people were selling knockoff Nike shoes way before there's an internet. And so we're pivoting our marketing efforts to be more of a cybersecurity company. And I kind of joke that, we were AI before AI was cool. Because I mean, in 2019, we were looking at these bad URLs. That's way before AI got to be a big thing. That was before COVID. And so as we market ourselves more as an AI security company, I think we get more notice, and hopefully get our name out there, and people will understand what we do more. But it's a challenge. The security business in general got overfunded, in my opinion, a couple of years ago, and there's a lot of companies out there doing a lot of things, and a lot of them are kind of neat things, but how many neat things does a company need, and how many neat things can a company even digest, right? Much less afford. It's tough for these CISOs, and you see it. I've been calling on CISOs now for, I don't know, 20 years, and it's a lot harder to get them to return a call these days because they just have so many of them. And so you got to have your solution working and go through partners that they sometimes have their trusted VARs who are kind of weed out some of the security companies, so they don't have to look at so many. So it's tough. But I guess in summary, I see our biggest challenges more in marketing and sales than anything else.
Yeah, and in a economy now where the consumer has so much access to information, the real challenge becomes how do you kind of break through the noise and get people to see what you're up to. And I wonder how some of your earlier influences have kind of helped shape your approach to the way that you look to kind of inspire your marketing team to work on developing that message.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I hope this answer is not too long. But when we started selling Fortify, it was very much an enterprise software buy, very traditional enterprise software. We would wake up on Monday morning, fly to New York, take people out for lunch, take people out for dinner, all these big banks and these big companies. And after about 9 months or 12 months, we'd get a pretty decent sized order. And then about a year to 18 months later, we'd get a follow-on order that was even bigger. And so it was a very much an enterprise sale. And we built up a sales team of elephant hunters that are just really sharp, high paid people that could go out and get these deals. And it worked well. And then we went over to Alien Vault, and Alien Vault was a SIM, but it was not a super high-end SIM like ArcSight or some of these others. It was, and we tried that enterprise sale approach, and all our old friends who were CISOs say, no, thanks. I'm not even happy with my Porsche. So I'm not going to buy a Chevy. And so we had to pivot, and we did. So we pivoted to a velocity sales model and brought in some people that really knew that business, and they taught us a lot. But and the person who ran it, Rita Savalji, she was the person who had built SolarWinds, and she had this mantra kind of, people these days, they want to find you on their own, they want to research you on their own, and they want to try you on their own. And if all that works, then they'll give you a call. And so there's no more knocking on people's door and telling them about the great thing you have. So you need to put out a bunch of content that that people want to read, not necessarily product sheets about, hey, this product's the greatest product in the world. They want to see a use case. This is how this is the use case, this is the solution for it. And then they can make the decision if something like that makes sense for their use case, for their problem. And if you put that content out there, do some webinars and just get yourself out there and really work on the SEO, the people who are interested in your solution will come to you. And it's not like they'll knock on the door and just start buying, but they'll sign up for a sales call. They'll sign up for a POC. They'll do those types of things. And the idea that you can go out there and just bang on the doors, send a whole team of SDRs after people to cold call people, that's a really tough model these days. I think. I think the SDR callback rate is much lower. Now there are some tools like 6 Sense that help narrow that down, so you can tell what people are looking for, and you can reach out to them and do that outbound. But and we do outbound, but we really concentrate on the inbound. And from my standpoint, it's better to have a customer who has a problem that you fix and likes the way you approach the solution, so you don't waste their time, and you can hopefully get them something that is going to help them out, and they become good customers. So that's the approach we're kind of taking here, and that's how we evolved here, because we didn't. In my history, we did not start out like that. Started out very much big enterprise, big software sales, and have pivoted to that enterprise model. And at Bolster, we now have solutions that start as low as $50 a month, all the way up to 6 figures. And so we can fit into almost everybody's budget. And then they get a good feel for what it's like to work with us as a company, and what it's like, what our products do, what they don't do, and they can decide if it makes sense for them. So that's kind of our sales philosophy. I hope I didn't go too far off track there.
No, that's actually perfect, because one of the things that I love to touch on is the fact that a lot of these companies that are out here, especially, complicated service companies, and I'm trying to be as general as I can there, but where it's impossible to very simply have a concise message like, oh, if you need to bake a cake, here's milk and eggs and flour. It's not that simple. Well, there's so much more stuff going on. So we need to take more time to communicate that. And so these companies are finding themselves more and more in the arena of becoming a media agency, where they have to create their own content on a consistent basis, so that they're answering the questions that their potential clients are asking. They're being discovered by that content, and then from that content, somehow intentionally leading people back to a service offering of some kind. And so it's a very challenging landscape. And so you're not alone in that regard. One of the things, though, that this kind of brings up is that because it's a very intangible or very long sales process, tracking it and measuring it becomes increasingly more difficult. I wonder if maybe you could share with the audience some of the metrics that you're using to kind of help steer and guide the ship in terms of deciding whether or not the efforts that you put forth are fruitful.
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was giving you the Alien Vault experience, one of the first things the person running marketing down there is brought in an engineer from Texas A&M that was a data specialist. And I was like, I've never seen a marketing team hire an engineer before. What's going on? Yeah. And it turned out that he ended up building up a team, and it was critical to the business, because when you're doing this digital marketing, metrics are everything, because you got to get to the point where you know what you're doing, and you test all these different things, and you can see what works and what doesn't, and then you can kind of double down, obviously, on the things that work. And so you have to be able to measure the campaigns, the where the traffic is coming from, what keywords are bringing people in, what all the way down to the very, very granular detail. And we have a data team here, and it's integral to us. And they're doing a great job, and they got a lot more work to do, because you got to be really good at this. And it's constant. At Alien Vault, we ended up with a data lake. I think it was on Snowflake or somewhere, and they were querying it with Tableau or something. I don't know, but it was like a science into itself. But they got to the point where we'd have our operations meetings on Monday, and they could say, the marketing team would say, we're going to put another $20,000 here because we know this is paying off, or we're canceling this. If they gave a script to a salesperson and it didn't close the deal, they would assume the script was not correct, or maybe a company that they were reading the script to was incorrect. The last thing they would think is the person reading the script was doing it incorrectly.
Right.
And that's a big step for a lot of people. They would blame it on themselves and say, okay, we're not bringing the right people to hear the script, or we're not giving the person the right script. And so measuring all that stuff, what scripts you're giving, what and how they're correlating with whatever person's coming in, getting all that stuff dialed in is just so important. So we have an operations meeting here every Monday and go through it. It seems like every week it's just drill down further, drill down further, drill down further, and it's an ongoing thing.
So some part of it is like an internal process in refining that. At any point do you look externally for other partners to collaborate with, or specialists, or do you hire for that to keep it all in-house as you're developing it out?
That's a great question. We've done it in-house, and traditionally, as I was mentioning, it was done in-house. But I'm not sure if there aren't some external solutions these days that really help with that, right? And I talked to a couple, and we have I think a demo in 2 weeks with another one, and we'll see if we think the ROI in one of those is good, is worth it. But it may be. There's so much data these days, and the fact that everything's SaaS and you can plug into it and get the data fairly easily. If someone out there does this for a living and concentrates on it, maybe they're better than the internal solution. And we have internal data experts here, but if you combine those with these people who are building tools for a few years on this, you might have a really killer solution. So I'm very open to outside people doing it. And maybe that's because I'm in a business, this phishing business. People used to kind of try to solve that themselves, right?
Right.
They would call places for takedowns, and they finally go like, oh, we're not efficient enough. So I could certainly see us not being as efficient as possible in an area that we don't sell, right? We don't have our R&D team working on it.
Right. This is one of those situations where it's the difference between a handyman and an electrician. They're both capable, but the electrician probably has a deeper knowledge in the practice, and so can get more effective or more efficient results, whether that be solving the problem faster or solving it more effectively, right?
Yeah, and he probably shows up in a van with a whole bunch of great tools
Yeah.
that he can afford that other people can't.
Yeah, thanks to that specialty. That's true. So, Jack, as we kind of come to a close of our time together here, I wonder if maybe we can look forward and maybe explore some of the things that are coming down the pipeline. What's on the horizon for Bolster? What sort of goals are you aiming at? What's in store for the work you're doing?
Well, we're certainly trying to stay on top of the phishing, and I would say 90% of the phishing attacks that we detect and the scams that we see are routine everyday scams. But that other percentage are these really complicated ones, and we feel like being on top of that is really, really important. And we've developed relationships with these people for takedowns, but we also have a relationship with a law firm in Washington, D.C., whose principal sits on the ICON board. And we've worked with them to do UDRP filings to take things down in, kind of these really hard to get a judgment enforced countries. And you can imagine what some of those are. But ICON can shut things down. And especially for phishing, malware, botnets, they'll get involved. Counterfeiting, not so much, because it's harder for them to determine if it's real or not. But so we are really into making sure that all the takedowns happen as quickly as possible, because it's cost the customers money. So we want to really stay on top of that. But we also have all this AI that we're moving more into email. Like, we're now looking at the abuse mailboxes of a handful of our customers, and those things have thousands of emails every week that they get. Some are phish, some are not. But not only are we really good at telling which ones are fish and which ones are not, we'll go take down the ones that are fish. And they it's weird looking at an external mailbox because you're just average customers sending it in. You can imagine, like, you're probably a Netflix customer. Maybe you send an email in, but millions of people do that. When you look at their uh, 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 emails, they may be a QR code, or it may be a screen grab, or maybe from a phone or something. So you got to be able to OCR all that and look at the QR codes. It's very complicated. So we're moving towards being able to get really good at looking at all those emails, because we have all the technology for detecting fish and detecting scams. So we're just adding that into like a new vector, if you will. So that's kind of where we're going.
Right, yeah. Tackling some of the bigger stuff that's out there, the more sophisticated problems um is definitely necessary, and it's good to hear that you're out there up to that kind of work. Um, so as we close off here, I wonder, Jack, if there is a piece of advice that you could offer somebody else who's like kind of out there and up to it and trying to build their business, what would that piece of advice be?
Well, I think I would look at there's reasons why small businesses don't work, right? Maybe the product's too hard to make. It's just too technological complex. Maybe the market timing's wrong. Maybe it's too early. Maybe it's too late. Or maybe you run out of money. You don't have enough money for the runway. So you got to look at all those things. But probably the biggest one that trips people up is executing. And so you got to really, really execute. And to execute, I think you have objectives that you get everybody to agree on. You have you have strategies that you develop, and you have tactics that you use. And you let your employees do whatever tactics they think is best, because it's almost impossible to get into their space and do their tactics. But strategies you can all agree on. But you measure that stuff, and you got to convince your team you're measuring it to see if the strategy and the tactics are working, not to measure you, the individual, to see if you're doing your job or not. Measure it because the strategy may be wrong. We're not going to change the objective. We all agreed on that, but we may have to change strategies, right? And we may have to change tactics. But then, and you don't, and the sooner you can find out if that's working or not and change, the better off you'll be. And so measuring that stuff is really, really important.
Yeah, and being agile, as you mentioned, to be able to adjust course quickly if if you learn something that isn't serving or you discover something that will. So that being nimble in your execution is definitely valuable too.
Yes.
Jack, if somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain further or perhaps work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably just send an email to jack.marshall@bolster.ai.
Perfect. Cool. We'll make sure to link to your contact in the show notes for anybody that's watching or listening. And on that note, if you want to get in touch with me and my team for any of your marketing needs, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us for this conversation, and I will see you in the next.